That night, the bus station had only one departure left. Carter Hayes gripped the last ticket. The only way home to Audrey, his 8-year-old daughter burning with fever and struggling to breathe. Then he saw a stranger, coat soaked through, shivering from cold, shoved out of line by security for having no money. Her eyes didn't beg, only showed desperation. Carter swallowed hard, stepped forward, placed the ticket in her hand, and turned away. Carter Hayes was 36 years old and worked nights as a maintenance technician in an aging office building downtown. The job paid poorly and offered no security. Every shift meant crawling through dusty ventilation shafts, fixing broken heating units, and pretending not to hear the executives upstairs complain about people like him. He lived in a rental unit on the east side, the kind of neighborhood where landlords didn't fix leaks and neighbors kept to themselves. The walls were thin. The radiator clanked. The rent was always 2 weeks from being late. He had been alone for 5 years. His wife died in a traffic accident on a winter morning much like this one. He didn't talk about it often. There was a chipped mug in the cabinet that still had her lipstick stain on the rim. There was a coat hanging in the closet that he couldn't bring himself to donate. That was all he allowed himself to remember on most days. Audrey was 8 now. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's quiet resilience. She also had asthma, the kind that flared up whenever the temperature dropped or the air turned damp. Every cold front was a countdown. Every wheeze was a warning. Carter had learned to recognize the sound of her labored breathing over the phone, the way she tried to sound brave even when she was terrified. Tonight had been one of those nights. He had just been paid, but the money was already spoken for. Medical bills from last month. Overdue rent. A new inhaler prescription. By the time he subtracted everything, he had just enough left for a single bus ticket home. Not a taxi. Not in rideshare. Just the last bus of the night. The station was nearly empty. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. The air smelled of diesel fuel and wet concrete. The speakers crackled with automated announcements. Carter stood near the ticket counter, phone pressed to his ear. On the other end, Audrey coughed. It wasn't the small, polite kind of cough. It was deep and rattling, the kind that made his chest tighten in sympathy. "I'm okay, Dad," she said, her voice hoarse. He could hear the lie. She was trying to be strong for him, the same way he tried to be strong for her. Carter glanced at the clock on the wall. 40 minutes. If he caught this bus, he would be home in 40 minutes. He could get her the inhaler. He could sit with her until the wheezing stopped. He could make sure she was safe. "I'm on my way," he said quietly. "Just hang on." He ended the call and exhaled slowly. The ticket was warm in his hand. Then he heard the commotion near the front of the station. The woman appeared at the edge of his vision first, a blur of dark fabric and wet hair. She was maybe 32, with a face that looked exhausted but not defeated. Her coat was plain and soaked through, clinging to her shoulders. Her shoes were scuffed and dirty, as though she had been walking for miles. But there was something about her posture, something that didn't quite fit. She stood too straight. Her gaze was too sharp. She didn't look like someone asking for help. She looked like someone trying very hard not to be recognized. The ticket agent, a middle-aged man named Otis, stared at her with open suspicion. "No money, no ticket," he said flatly. The woman reached into her coat pocket, pulled out nothing, and her expression flickered for just a moment. Panicked. Then it was gone, replaced by something colder. "I can pay you tomorrow," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Sure you can," Otis muttered. He waved toward the exit. "Move along." Before she could respond, a security guard stepped forward. His name was Bernie, and he had the look of a man who enjoyed small displays of power. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to make a point. "You heard him. Go somewhere else." Carter watched as the woman was guided toward the door. She didn't resist. She didn't shout. She just let herself be moved, her face expressionless. But then something fell from her coat pocket. A plastic card, maybe an ID, maybe something else. She bent quickly, scooped it up, and shoved it back into her coat before anyone else could see. Carter's eyes narrowed. That wasn't the movement of someone careless. That was the reflex of someone hiding something. The woman glanced up at the departure board, her lips moving as though she were reading the routes aloud. She knew the system. She knew it too well for someone who supposedly had no money and no plan. And when she turned slightly, Carter saw her deliberately avoid the security camera mounted above the door. It was subtle, but it was there. He recognized something in her. Not her face, not her voice, but the way she held herself when Bernie pushed her aside. The way her jaw tightened but her expression stayed neutral. He had felt that before. The humiliation of being treated like trash. The exhaustion of pretending it didn't hurt. The overhead speaker crackled to life. Final boarding for Route 12. Doors close in 60 seconds. Carter looked down at the ticket in his hand. His thumb brushed over the printed numbers. He thought of Audrey. He thought of the 40-minute ride home. He thought of how much worse her breathing had sounded in the last 10 minutes. Then he looked at the woman. She was standing just outside the glass doors now, shoulders hunched against the cold. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just standing there, as though she had run out of options and was too tired to care. Carter pulled out his phone and called Audrey again. She answered on the second ring. "Dad! Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." Another cough, deeper this time. "Are you almost home?" He closed his eyes. "Yeah, almost." "Okay." Her voice was so small. "I'm okay, Dad." "Really?" She was lying. He knew she was lying. And she knew he knew. But they both pretended anyway, because that was what they did. "I'll be there soon," he said. He hung up. The woman was still outside, her breath fogging in the cold air. The bus engine rumbled to life. Carter looked at the ticket one more time. Then he walked toward the door. Bernie was still standing near the entrance, arms crossed. He smirked when he saw Carter approaching. "Gonna miss your bus, buddy." Carter ignored him. He stepped outside and walked directly to the woman. She looked up, startled, as though she couldn't believe someone was coming toward her instead of away. He held out the ticket. "Take it." She stared at him. "What?" "The bus. Take it." His voice was flat, final. "Don't come back." For a moment, she didn't move. Then her hand reached out slowly, as though she thought he might snatch it away at the last second. Her fingers closed around the ticket. "Why?" Carter didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the station. Behind him, he heard her footsteps running toward the bus. He heard the doors hiss open. He heard the driver call out, "Last call." Bernie laughed. "You serious? You just gave away your ride?" Carter said nothing. He watched through the glass as the woman climbed onto the bus. She paused at the top of the steps and looked back at him, her face unreadable. Then she disappeared inside. The doors closed. The bus pulled away, its taillights fading into the snowy darkness. Otis shook his head from behind the counter. "That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen." Carter pulled out his phone and texted his neighbor, Amanda Dea. She was a single mother herself, someone who understood what it meant to need help. He asked her to check on Audrey. She replied immediately, "On my way." He stood there for another moment, staring at the empty space where the bus had been. Then he zipped up his coat, pulled the collar tight, and walked out into the storm. The snow was falling harder now. The wind cut through his jacket like glass. The walk home was 7 miles, maybe 8 if he took the safer route under the overpass. Carter had walked in worse weather before. He told himself it would be fine. He told himself he just needed to keep moving. The streetlights flickered as he trudged through the empty streets. Most of them were out. The city had been cutting services for months, and this neighborhood was always the first to lose power. Carter kept his head down and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. His fingers were already numb inside his gloves. Halfway through the second mile, a car came out of nowhere. Its headlights swept across the icy road too fast, tires skidding. Carter barely had time to leap out of the way. He hit the snowbank hard, his shoulder slamming into frozen dirt. The car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. Carter lay there for a moment, breath knocked out of him, staring up at the falling snow. He pushed himself to his feet. His head throbbed. His shoulder ached. But nothing felt broken, so he kept walking. At home, Audrey was getting worse. Amanda had arrived and found the girl struggling to use her inhaler, her hands shaking too much to press the canister properly. Amanda called 911, but the dispatcher said the roads were too dangerous. Ambulances were delayed. The best they could do was wait. "Where's my dad?" Audrey whispered. "He's coming, sweetie. He'll be here soon." But Audrey's breathing was getting shallower. Her lips were starting to turn pale. Amanda grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders, trying to keep her calm. "Just breathe slowly, okay? In and out, nice and slow." Audrey nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. He's just stuck in the snow." Audrey looked toward the window. Outside, the storm howled. Carter was closer now. He could see the outline of his building in the distance. His legs felt like lead. His lungs burned from the cold. He was so focused on moving forward that he didn't notice the patch of black ice until his foot slipped out from under him. He went down hard, his head cracking against the edge of a concrete step. For a moment, everything went white, then gray. Then he was lying on his back, staring up at the sky, and he couldn't remember how to stand. He heard footsteps. Someone was shouting. A delivery driver named Finn had been dropping off packages nearby and saw him fall. "Hey! You okay?" Carter tried to answer, but his mouth wouldn't work. Finn pulled out his phone and called for help. Then he knelt down beside Carter and kept talking, trying to keep him conscious. "Stay with me, man. Ambulance is coming." "No way." Carter heard the sirens in the distance. He heard his daughter's name echoing in his head. And then, everything went dark. On the bus, Serafina Blake sat in the back row, as far from the other passengers as she could get. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and tried to breathe evenly. The ticket was still clutched in her right hand. She stared at it, as though it were a piece of evidence in a trial she hadn't yet been charged with. She was the CEO of Blake Transit Group, the largest public transportation network in the city. She had spent the last 3 weeks conducting an undercover investigation into her own company. Maintenance logs were being falsified. Safety inspections were being skipped. Equipment was being replaced with cheaper, substandard parts. And the money saved was being funneled into private accounts. She had suspected for months. But suspicions weren't enough. She needed proof. So she had gone dark. No security detail. No driver. No assistant. Just her. A fake ID. And a plan to ride every route in the system until she found the weak points. Tonight, she had found one. The road, 12 Depot. Cameras mysteriously offline. Guards conveniently absent. Ticket sales unrecorded. And then someone had recognized her. She didn't know who. She had been standing near the maintenance office, pretending to wait for a bus, when she heard footsteps behind her. A voice, low and urgent. "That's her?" She had turned, but the hallway was empty. By the time she reached the exit, someone had taken her phone, her wallet, her ID. She had been shoved out the back door and told to disappear. If she came back, if she said anything, they would make sure she regretted it. Serafina wasn't stupid. She knew what that meant. She also knew who was behind it. Clinton Ward, the chief operating officer. He had been pushing a cost-cutting initiative for months, one that prioritized profits over safety. She had resisted. He had smiled and said he understood. And then he had quietly started building a case to replace her. She looked out the window as the bus moved through the dark streets. Snow swirled past the glass. She thought about the man who had given her this ticket. He hadn't asked her name. He hadn't asked for anything in return. He had just handed it to her and walked away, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She had seen his face for only a moment, but she had memorized it. The tired eyes. The worn jacket. The way he had hesitated before stepping forward. This was a man who had given up something important. And she needed to know why. More than that, she needed to find him. Because in a city full of people who looked the other way, who followed orders, who kept their heads down, he had done something different. He had chosen to help. And if she was going to take down Clinton Ward, she was going to need people like him. Her assistant, Rosalind Pierce, was probably looking for her by now. Rosalind was smart, efficient, and loyal. To Clinton. Golf. Serafina had suspected it for weeks, but tonight had confirmed it. The way Rosalind had conveniently forgotten to update her schedule. The way the security detail had been reassigned. The way her access codes had stopped working. Serafina leaned her head against the cold window. She was tired. She was angry. But more than anything, she was determined. This wasn't over. Carter woke up in a hospital bed. His head was wrapped in gauze. His shoulder was immobilized. The fluorescent lights above him were too bright. He blinked, disoriented, and tried to sit up. Easy. A nurse appeared beside him, gently pushing him back down. "You took a pretty hard fall, Audrey," he rasped. "Where's my daughter? She's okay. She's stable." The doctors got her breathing under control. Relief hit him so hard he almost passed out again. "Can I see her? In a little while? You need to rest first." But Carter didn't rest. He stared at the ceiling and thought about the bill that was accumulating with every minute. He stayed here. He thought about the bus ticket he had given away. He thought about how he was going to pay for any of this. The door to his room opened. A woman walked in, and for a moment Carter didn't recognize her. She was wearing a tailored coat, clean and dry. Her hair was pulled back. She looked nothing like the desperate stranger from the bus station. But her eyes were the same. Behind her was a man in an expensive suit. He introduced himself as Elias Grant, an attorney. Serafina stepped forward and placed something on the bedside table. The bus ticket. It was still creased from where she had gripped it. "You remember me?" she asked. Carter stared at her. Then, at the ticket. "What are you doing here?" "I came to say thank you." She paused. "And to ask for your help. I don't need your thanks. I know." She pulled up a chair and sat down, meeting his eyes directly. "But I need to explain who I am, and what you helped me do." Carter's jaw tightened. "You don't owe me anything. You're right. I don't. But I'm going to pay your hospital bill anyway. And your daughter's medical expenses. And I'm going to set her up with a respiratory care program that will make sure she never has to wait for an inhaler again." Carter's face darkened. "I don't want charity." "No, not." "It's not charity," Serafina said evenly. "It's an investment." "In what?" "In someone who still believes in doing the right thing, even when it costs him everything." She told him the truth then. About Blake Transit Group. About the investigation. About Clinton Ward and Rosalind Pierce, and the systematic gutting of safety protocols in exchange for short-term profits. She told him about the cameras that had been tampered with, the records that had been altered, the accidents that had been covered up. And then she told him about the night 5 years ago when a bus had skidded on an icy road and collided with a sedan. A bus whose brakes had been replaced with cheaper, uncertified parts 3 weeks earlier. A bus that should have stopped but didn't. Carter went very still. "What are you saying?" Serafina's voice was quiet. "I'm saying that the accident that killed your wife may not have been an accident." The room was silent for a long moment. Carter's hands clenched into fists. His breathing was shallow. "You're telling me someone cut corners and my wife died because of it. I'm saying it's possible. And if it's true, I'm going to prove it. But I can't do it alone." Carter looked at her. "Why me?" "Because you're a maintenance technician. You know how systems work. You know how to find the things people try to hide, and you're not on anyone's radar." "And dangerous," Elias added. Carter shook his head. "I just want to go home to my daughter." "I understand," Serafina said. "But I'm asking you to think about all the other daughters out there. All the other families who might lose someone because a few men decided profit was more important than safety." Carter was silent. Then he asked, "What do you need?" Serafina pulled out a tablet and showed him surveillance footage from the bus depot. "This is from the night you gave me the ticket. Watch the timestamp." Carter watched. The footage showed the ticket counter. It showed Serafina being escorted out. It showed him handing her the ticket. And then it jumped. 12 minutes. Gone. "They erased it," Carter said. "They tried to. But erasure leaves traces. And those traces can be recovered. I just need someone who knows how to get into places they're not supposed to be." Carter looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the ticket on the table. "If I do this, I do it on my terms. No one touches my daughter. No one even knows she exists." "Agreed. And if you're lying to me, if this is some kind of publicity stunt, I walk. No questions. No explanations." Serafina extended her hand. "Deal." Carter shook it. They met again 3 days later, after Carter had been discharged, and Audrey was well enough to stay with Amanda. Serafina had arranged for them to access the bus depot during a maintenance shift. Carter wore his usual work uniform. Serafina wore a visitor's badge that Elias had forged. They looked like two people who had every reason to be there. The depot was nearly empty at this hour. The night shift was skeletal. Most of the buses were parked in neat rows, their engines cold. Carter led Serafina to the control room, where the surveillance system was housed. The door was locked, but Carter had spent years learning how to bypass cheap locks. It took him less than a minute. Inside, the room was cramped and cluttered. Monitors lined the walls, most of them displaying static or blank screens. Carter found the main server and powered it on. Serafina stood behind him, recording everything on her phone. "Look at this," Carter muttered. He pointed to a tangle of wires behind the server. Someone rewired the power supply. It's not professional, but it's deliberate. They wanted to be able to cut the cameras remotely. "Can you trace where the signal came from?" Carter pulled up the logs. The data was fragmented, but he found what he was looking for, this IP address. "It's registered to the executive floor of Blake Transit Group." Serafina's face hardened. "That's Clinton's office." Before they could investigate further, the door behind them rattled. Someone was trying to get in. Carter grabbed Serafina's arm and pulled her toward the emergency exit. They ran. They didn't make it far. Bernie, the security guard from the bus station, was waiting at the end of the hallway. He wasn't alone. Rosalind Pierce stood beside him, her expression cold. "Going somewhere?" Rosalind asked. Carter stepped in front of Serafina. "We're leaving." "I don't think so." Bernie moved forward, but Carter was faster. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed it directly into Bernie's face. The man stumbled back, cursing. Carter grabbed Serafina's hand and ran. They ducked through a maintenance corridor, their footsteps echoing. Behind them, Rosalind was shouting orders into her phone. "Lock down the building. Don't let them leave." Carter found a side door that led to the bus yard. He forced it open and dragged Serafina outside. The cold air hit them like a wall. They ran between the rows of parked buses, trying to stay out of sight. But Rosalind had backup. 2 more guards appeared at the far end of the yard. Carter changed direction, pulling Serafina toward the maintenance garage. The door was locked. He kicked it open. Inside, he found what he was looking for: a control panel for the automatic gates. He flipped the switch, and the gates began to grind open. "Go. Now." Serafina hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be fine. Just go." She didn't move. "I'm not leaving you." Carter looked at her, and for the first time, he saw something other than calculation in her eyes. He saw fear. Not for herself. For him. "Then we both go," he said. They ran together. Behind them, Clinton Ward's voice echoed over the intercom. "If she walks out of here, the cost-cutting measures become permanent. No oversight, no accountability. We'll save millions." Carter heard something else in Clinton's voice. Desperation. The man was cornered, and cornered men did dangerous things. Serafina stumbled. Her foot caught on a patch of ice, and she went down hard. Carter turned back and grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet. The gate was 50 feet away, then 30, then 10. And then a metal security door began to descend, blocking their exit. Carter looked up. The door was heavy, industrial grade. If it closed, they wouldn't be able to open it from the inside. He had maybe 5 seconds. He shoved Serafina through the gap. "Go." She rolled under the door just as it slammed shut. Carter was on the other side, trapped. For a moment, Serafina just stared at him through the narrow window in the door. Then she pulled out her phone and called Elias. "I need police, now." Carter leaned against the door, breathing hard. He could hear footsteps approaching. He could hear Clinton's voice, low and angry. "You should have stayed out of this." But Carter wasn't afraid. He looked through the window and saw Serafina standing outside, phone pressed to her ear, and he knew she would finish what they started. Elias Grant worked fast. Within an hour, federal investigators were at the depot. Within 2 hours, the entire executive floor of Blake Transit Group was under lockdown. Serafina presented the evidence, the tampered surveillance footage, the IP logs, the financial records showing unauthorized payments to offshore accounts. She presented testimony from maintenance workers who had been pressured to cut corners. She presented accident reports that had been altered to hide equipment failures. And then she presented the final piece. A recovered email from Clinton Ward to Rosalind Pierce, dated 5 years earlier. The email discussed a decision to delay brake replacements on a specific bus route, the same route that had been involved in the accident that killed Carter's wife. Clinton tried to deny it. He claimed the email was taken out of context. He claimed he was being framed. But when investigators found matching financial transactions and supplier invoices, his story fell apart. Rosalind Pierce turned on him immediately. In exchange for immunity, she provided testimony detailing Clinton's entire operation. The cost-cutting schemes. The falsified safety reports. The systematic removal of anyone who asked too many questions. At the emergency board meeting, Serafina stood in front of the entire executive team and laid out the truth. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Clinton Ward was arrested during the meeting. So was Rosalind. Bernie and Otis were brought in for questioning. The charges ranged from fraud to criminal negligence to conspiracy. Carter stood in the back of the room, watching. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired. And sad. Because knowing the truth about his wife's death didn't bring her back. It just meant he finally had someone to blame. After the meeting, Serafina found him. "Thank you," she said. Carter shook his head. "I didn't do this for you. I know." She hesitated. "There's something else. I want to set up a medical fund for children with respiratory conditions. I'd like to name it after Audrey. If that's okay with you." Carter looked at her. "Why?" "Because you gave me something I didn't think existed anymore. You reminded me that not everyone is out for themselves. That some people still do the right thing just because it's right." Carter didn't know what to say to that. So he just nodded. Serafina also offered him a job. Not as a maintenance technician. As a safety compliance officer. Someone who would oversee inspections, review protocols, and make sure nothing like this ever happened again. The pay was better. The hours were better. And it was a job that mattered. Carter accepted. 3 months later, the bus depot looked different. The cameras had been replaced. The maintenance logs were digital and tamper-proof. The safety inspections were conducted by independent auditors. Serafina had overhauled the entire system, and she had done it publicly, inviting media scrutiny and community oversight. The Audrey Hayes Respiratory Fund was officially launched at a ceremony downtown. Audrey attended, shy but smiling, her inhaler tucked safely in her pocket. Carter stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. Serafina gave a speech about accountability and second chances, and the importance of doing the right thing even when no one was watching. Afterward, she found Carter near the back of the room. She was holding something small, wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to give you this." Carter unwrapped it. It was a small wooden frame. Inside was the bus ticket he had given her that night, preserved behind glass. Below it, a small brass plaque read, "One small act of kindness can save a life." Carter stared at it for a long time. Then he looked up at Serafina. "I didn't do it to save your life. I did it because I wanted my daughter to believe that good people still exist." Serafina's eyes were bright. "Maybe we both got what we needed." Audrey ran over then, breathless and excited. She grabbed Carter's hand, then looked up at Serafina. For a moment, she was shy. Then she reached out her other hand. Serafina took it. The three of them stood there, surrounded by the noise of the ceremony, the flashing of cameras, the murmur of voices. But in that moment, it was quiet. It was just the three of them, holding on to something fragile and real. Carter looked down at the framed ticket. He thought about that night. The cold. The snow. The choice he had made without knowing what it would cost or what it would mean. He thought about how easily he could have walked onto that bus. How easily he could have looked away. But he hadn't. And because of that, everything had changed. Not just for him. Not just for Serafina. But for every person who rode a bus in this city. For every family that depended on a system that was supposed to keep them safe. For every child who deserved a chance to grow up. Audrey tugged on his hand. "Dad? Are you okay?" Carter looked down at her. Her face was flushed and happy. Her breathing was steady. She was okay. and for the first time in a long time, so was he. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm okay." Serafina squeezed Audrey's hand gently. "You have a very brave father." Audrey smiled. "I know." They walked outside together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. A bus pulled up to the curb, its doors opening with a hiss of air. Passengers climbed aboard, tired and ready to go home. The driver checked tickets and offered directions. The bus pulled away, merging into traffic. It was an ordinary moment, the kind that happened 1,000 times a day in cities everywhere. But Carter saw it differently now. He saw the mechanics behind it. The people who maintained the brakes and checked the lights and made sure everything worked the way it was supposed to. He saw the responsibility. Serafina saw it too. She had stopped taking the company car. These days, she rode the buses herself. She sat in the back and listened to passengers talk. She learned their routes and their complaints and their hopes. She learned what mattered. And every time she stepped onto a bus, she thought about the man who had given up his seat so she could have one. The framed ticket hung in Carter's small apartment, right above the kitchen table where Audrey did her homework. She asked about it sometimes. He told her the truth, that he'd given something away when he couldn't afford to, that it had led to something bigger, that sometimes doing the right thing didn't make sense until much later. Audrey listened carefully. Then she said, "Would you do it again?" Carter thought about it. He thought about the cold, and the fear, and the not knowing. He thought about everything that had happened since. "Yeah," he said finally. "I would. Because that was the thing about choices. You made them in a moment, but you lived with them forever. And the only way to live with them was to make sure they were choices you could stand behind. Choices that said something about who you were and what you believed." Carter believed in kindness. He believed in sacrifice. He believed that the world was hard and unfair and often cruel, but that it didn't have to stay that way. Not if people chose differently. One small act of kindness could save a life. It could change a system. It could remind someone that good people still existed. And sometimes, that was enough.